Namaste, hola, hello, good evening. We welcome you to the Naturalist Future, a brand new knowledge series by Natural Remedies India. And I thank you all for joining this session, and we look forward for you to have a good one. We all know that future belongs to the alternatives. But what if such possibilities are derived scientifically and natural too? Isn't it? I mean, are we excited that, yes, something is scientific, something is natural? Yes, this knowledge series is an attempt from our side to share knowledge on such scientific alternatives which can be future of animal healthcare industry. Now, I once again welcome you all to Phytogenics, the Unraveling Tradition. So, a bit about natural remedies. Few of you might be knowing natural remedies, but let me still, re-emphasize on now what is natural remedies, who are we, short. So we are rated as #1 veterinary herbal company, herbal animal healthcare company in India. Our natural solutions are across globe accepted in 30 countries. We support needs of monogastric and ruminant animal population. So we are there. So this is just about us. But how we became #1? There is something every organization has, some or the other core strength. And our core strength is our innovation center. That is Natural Remedies Research and Development Wing. So I want you to have a look at how strong our research and development is. Why we say that it is important? We have 40 scientists, 40 different domain experts who are on our panel and who helps to take this natural solutions to the next level completely. And because of them, we have released more than 120 scientific publications in the peer-reviewed journals. We have 220 plus phyto compounds given for the global reference as a standard. We also have 100 plus monographs released for different pharmacopoeias of the world. And if I have to take a name, US Pharmacopoeia and British Pharmacopoeia are top among them. Definitely, being an Indian, being a Bharatiya company, we are definitely given to the Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia also. And all these things gives us something different. There is another important feather in our R&D. That is, we have 15 plus patents in our pocket, and that is what makes us proud and expert of the natural solutions. So this is about us. Now I want you to look at today's expert. I want to introduce you today's expert speaker, Dr. Deepak, who is general manager and heads the research and development. So he's the man who drives all these things. And here you can see how he looks also. So you can imagine, you're going to see him shortly. He is PhD from CSIR, that is Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine. And he has expertise in a lot of things, but over 2 decades, he has expertise in bioactive and phytochemistry. So, now I'm not going to make you wait for more for the session. But before that, one quick request to everyone. We would like to have questions from your side. And if you are viewing from your desktop or laptop, you can see a question screen on the right hand side. If you are viewing us from mobile, you have to see below the screen. You will find an option of question. We welcome your questions whenever you can. You please put it there so we can take it up at the time of Q&A session. Also, we want to seek your valuable opinion through different things. So we also have a polling thing. And so there will be polling time. We request you to participate in that so you can help us with more information you can. Now, I will hand it over this session to Dr. Deepak. Dr. Deepak, may I please welcome you on the stage and take it over the session further.
Thank you very much, Kusum. Namaste and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in this webinar. Really appreciate it. Today's webinar is about phytogenics. I wish to give you an overview of the concept of phytogenics. Broadly, I wish to phase my presentation into three components. At the first phase, I would like to touch upon the knowledge available in the traditional systems of medicine. What's the importance of this knowledge and how this knowledge got evolved over a period of time to head towards a segment called phytogenics. And in phase 2, we would touch upon different aspects of phytogenics. What are the different forms of phytogenics available today? How do they compare with each other with respect to the bioactive phytochemistry, with respect to efficacies, with respect to different characteristics? And what type of constituents are considered responsible for the biological activity of phytogenics? And then we move to one phytogenic that is well balanced, nothing but standardized botanical powder. In this, we would look at the typical composition of standardized botanical powder. How does standardization actually contribute to ensure consistency and quality and ultimately efficacy? So once we complete this, we would have a question and answer session, and then we will wind up. Well, traditional medicine is not new to any of us, I'm sure. Traditional medicine exists in different parts of the world. You can see particularly traditional medicine being very strong in Southeast Asian region, of course in the Indian subcontinent, and also in Korea and Japanese areas as well. And then in Europe and Latin America also, the presence of traditional medicine is quite strong. So why are we talking about traditional medicine? What's so important about traditional medicine? That's the place when we have to consider the fact that the traditional medicine has evolved over a period of thousands of years. That there lies the most important aspect of traditional medicine. In other words, if I have to apply a modern language to it, a kind of clinical trials with trial and error would have happened on a number of such medicinal plants throughout the world, and that ultimately has culminated in the form of traditional medicine. So this journey has been a very interesting journey, and let's have a look at the components of the journey. Okay, the foremost of traditional medicines in the Indian context is Ayurveda. Now, there is a general perception that Ayurveda is a system of medicine, but the reality is it is actually knowledge of life, or in simple words, it's considered way of life. What it actually means? It means it considers different aspects of life, both the physical, the good thoughts, that means the mental aspects, and the food, and finally the medicine. Of course, in the current session, we are going to be talking primarily the medicinal aspects of it in terms of how the unraveling of this knowledge has led to evolution of a segment called phytogenics. So this evolution had broadly two major components. One, the knowledge transfer from one generation to another by traditional medicine practitioners. In India, we call Vaidyas. The second component, which is also very significant, is the contribution from different disciplines like chemistry, biology, agronomy, quality, formulation, and perhaps interestingly, even at the production level with advancements in the production technologies. All these components have contributed significantly to this evolution process that has led to a segment today in the medicine, which is nothing but phytomedicine backed by science. Well, the concept of phytomedicine perhaps started getting crystallized in maybe 17th century or so. As you can see on the screen, a couple of medicinal plants were very powerful, like poppy seeds, which were having the analgesic activity, and morphine is the major constituent that contributed to the analgesic activity of poppy seeds. Likewise, quinine, the anti-malarial drugs from cinchona bark. The most interesting part of it is some of these discoveries happened way back are still being used. Is it not so interesting? Today, for example, if you look at morphine, it is still being used as the drug of choice as an analgesic in terminally ill patients that need a very powerful analgesic. Of course, it is not used as a general analgesic on account of multiple other things. But yes, it is still being used. So that's the power of phytomedicine, which actually started sometime way back in 17th century. And this journey actually continued with significant advancements in the science and technology areas where people were able to purify some of the minor constituents of the plants like, vinca alkaloids, vincristin, vinblastin, the docetaxel or the taxol, docetaxels. Very, very interesting because these compounds have been very powerful in terms of exerting the activity. In addition, some of the semi-synthetic derivatives of these compounds also have been worked out by some of the medicinal chemists to further optimize the activities of these compounds. Perhaps the culmination of all these efforts was kind of summarized with the award of Nobel Prize in the year 2015 for the discovery of artemisinin from Artemisia annua as an anti-malarial agent. So this really came as a testimony to the power of phytomedicine. Well, it's time to poll now. Request you all to have a look at your screen and participate in a poll question. We will have about 10 seconds. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation. Moving on. That was about the efficacy aspects of phytomedicine. But in order for the phytomedicine to be made available to humans and animals, there had to be quality standards laid out to make sure that the medicines given to the final intended subjects are safe. So keeping that part in mind, many of the regulatory agencies across the world have come up with pharmacopoeias and compendiums where the monographs on medicinal plants incorporating several analytical parameters were suggested. Like you could see here, British Herbal Pharmacopoeia. In US, we have Herbal Medicines Compendium. In Germany, in Thailand, and in China. So in many parts of the world, there was parallel efforts in the area of the quality and development of analytical monographs. As I mentioned earlier, the Southeast Asian region has always been at the forefront as far as phytomedicine is concerned. Vitex nigando is one such widely accepted plant in Philippines for multiple ailments. Likewise, Vietnam has its own traditional system of medicine, which is quite actually different from the Chinese medicine in the fact that they do not require the complicated extraction processes like the decoctions used in other forms of medicines. So the process of quality evolution was very much happening in India as well, in the context of Ayurveda. As you can see, good number of Indian medicinal plants actually were worked upon and got incorporated in many of the pharmacopoeias, like Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia of India, and the formulations got incorporated in the Ayurvedic Formulary of India, and some of the modern analytical methods got listed in Indian Herbal Pharmacopoeia and in the mainstream Indian Pharmacopoeia. So in the mainstream Pharmacopoeia of India today, good number of medicinal plant monographs are available where analytical methods are defined to ensure that there is quality compliance. The fact that the Indian government has constituted a separate ministry for Ayurveda and allied traditional medicines systems is a testimony to India's commitment to the traditional systems of medicine. Well, at the same time, the 20th century saw emergence of chemical era. Well, it had its own reasons. There were lots of developments that were happening, particularly in the early part of 20th century, which got extended later. These included something like world wars, World War I, World War II, and several diseases, epidemics, and pandemics affected the world. And it put tremendous pressure on the healthcare systems across the geographies. And pharmaceutical companies had to respond to the situation, and they worked on the chemical drugs in that context. So the chemical drugs developed during that period were pretty effective, very potent. Yes, during the later part of 20th century and early part of 21st century, the focus started going on the safety aspects. And that's where several toxicity concerns have been raised. Good number of drugs had to be withdrawn, and particularly with respect to antibiotics, there was a challenge of antimicrobial resistance. So all these situations have ultimately led to a kind of a re-emergence of phytogenics. So in today's context, all that has happened during last couple of centuries in particular, with scientific and quality contributions, have led to a segment that is phytomedicines, which is typically used for humans, and phytogenics for animals. Well, what are phytogenic additives? The phytogenic additives are formulations that are derived from plants and that contain natural bioactive compounds with positive effects on animal growth and health. Well, like there are different forms of phytogenic additives. We will touch upon each form in the subsequent slides. Perhaps the most characteristic feature of phytogenic additives is the fact that these additives have a very complex chemical composition, and they have a very unique way of producing the biological effects as compared to single chemical entities. So today, with the help of modern scientific technologies and methodologies, new formulations of phytogenics have come up, and these phytogenics are adding significant value to the animal health. These are the different forms of phytogenic additives available. As you can see here, like it starts with the whole herb botanicals, and there are several things that happen from here. Once you extract this with the help of typically solvents, you would get the plant extracts and oleoresins, where a good amount of phytochemical actives get eliminated and it gets purified. Further purification of this leads to purified essential oils and finally the single chemical constituents. So for example, if we look at the case of turmeric, the products are available at all stages, ultimately landing with curcumin, which is a pure chemical constituent. Time for the second poll question. Request you to go onto your screens once again and answer the poll question. We'll spend a few seconds. Thank you so much. So we will go to the next part of the webinar, where we are coming to some of the core aspects of phytogenics. As I said earlier, one of the key characteristics is that phytogenic additives have multiple biological actions. Very characteristic. If we take the case of like antimicrobial action, for example, as you know, like with respect to antibiotics, the antimicrobial action of antibiotics is entirely on account of the efficacy that it has in terms of killing the organisms on account of the antimicrobial effect, the hardcore antimicrobial effect. Vis-a-vis that, if we try to compare the plant products and if we compare the MIC values, it may not be as potent. But when you give the plant phytogenics to the whole body, then you start seeing a different type of effect. And you could start observing that the antimicrobial efficacies are pretty good. Then the question comes, how the activity is brought about when at the in vitro level you are not able to see that level of activity. That's the place where the holistic way of working of botanicals comes into picture. So if we still talk about antimicrobial, the actual antimicrobial action in vivo can be on account of multiple actions in the area of actual antimicrobial, antioxidative, immunomodulatory. For example, the immune stimulation is extremely essential to ward off pathogens. And plants are known to contain some very interesting compounds that are known to modulate the immune responses in a manner where it enhances the body's capability to fight off or ward off the pathogens. And finally, antiquorum sensing kind of approaches and thought processes have added new dimension to the way plant products work as antimicrobials. Just to take one more minute on a concept of antiquorum sensing, like bacteria too inside the body, particularly when they are in the form of maybe biofilms and things like that, they are known to kind of talk to each other with certain forms like auto-inducers. So they are known to release these auto-inducers which go outside, and when a particular threshold reaches, then these auto-inducers have the ability to create a positive cycle of further inducing it through a process of receptor binding and genetic modulation. So this process, why is it important? In humans and in animals, we have an advanced immune system which helps us to fight the invading pathogens. But plants do not have immune system. So people are now making an hypothesis that plants might actually be producing antiquorum sensing type of compounds in the form of some of the secondary metabolites, which in turn will help the plants to fight the pathogens and the bacteria in this particular case. So today, when these types of compounds are present in the plants and they go into animal body, the antiquorum sensing compounds play an important role in the overall antimicrobial efficacy of the product. So that's the power of holistic action of phytogenic additives to bring about antimicrobial actions. And some of these actions also kind of explain why the antimicrobial resistance phenomenon is not seen with plant phytogenics, but it is seen very much with the chemical drugs. So it's a very interesting story from that angle. In addition to what we discussed, plant products also are known to improve digestibility. They have profound actions on multiple sites in the digestive system, right from the digestive enzymes place in terms of inducing these enzymes to work better, and in modulating the intestinal morphology, which get affected in some of the inflammatory conditions in particular, and even in terms of stabilization of intestinal microbiota. As we all know, the importance of microbiota is increasingly being realized by the scientific community. And stabilization of microbiota can have many repercussions with respect to multiple functions in the body. Today, people are talking about gut-brain axis, gut-liver axis, and many other connections within the body where gut plays a very important role. So we can talk many things about the biological actions. Today, like for example, many of the secondary metabolites are known to have effect on HPA axis, which ultimately leads to anti-stress activity. So such, discoveries are playing an important role in the way the phytogenics are evolving, and new properties of phytogenics are getting discovered in the scientific arena. All said and done, even on the physical part also, many of the phytogenics play a very important role, like in terms of increasing the palatability, etc. Well, we discussed about different forms of the phytogenics. The first one is whole herb botanicals. As you can see here, the whole herb botanicals are derived from the whole plant or parts of the plant. The best part of whole herb botanicals is that the entire spectrum of chemistry available from any medicinal plant is available in the product. So that's the best part of whole herb botanicals. But whole herb botanicals comes with certain challenges also. If we are not able to standardize the botanicals well, then they are very prone to variations. So there is a very high level of importance of standardization and quality when it comes to whole herb botanicals. Of course, one more important advantage of whole herb botanicals is it is very closer to traditional systems of medicine. Then comes the extracts. So when the herbs or the parts of the plant, they get extracted with organic solvents, etc., then you would get either powdered extracts or you would get oleoresins. We all know, like there are several oleoresins like garlic, ginger, which are widely being used today. Well, these oleoresins are quite useful as phytogenics, but they come with certain disadvantages as well, particularly when it comes to stability. And the second part is when we do the extraction of medicinal plants, we would leave out something in the plant which would not be available for medicinal benefits in extracts and oleoresins. The further purification of particularly the oleoresins, where the resin component gets removed and you would get pure essential oils. So this is the next level of purification that can lead to highly purified hydrophobic liquids, which can be very powerful, no doubt about it. But at the same time, this purification brings its own set of limitations. A good number of essential constituents would have been removed by then. So you're dealing with only few compounds within the essential oils, if we have to start with the whole plant. And these are highly volatile constituents, which may have, again, the stability challenges, particularly during storage and incorporation in the feed. Well, this slide kind of summarizes, the whole sequence of how a fresh plant gets ultimately converted into different forms of phytogenics. Just to take you through quickly, like if we take fresh plant part, the fresh plant can be actually, converted into a juice or a juice powder after drying. So this is, one form of phytogenic, maybe used more in the form of traditional medicines. But after this, you dry the plant, and the dried plant parts can be fine ground, sieved and blended, and it can be sold as straight herb powders. But if you apply the principles of standardization and the techniques of standardization and the whole concept of standardization to take the quality to the next level, then comes the standardized botanical powders, about which we will talk later. Then you can also have the dried plant getting extracted, coarse ground and extracted with organic solvents, and the extracted component gets concentrated, and it can be sold as an oleoresin. Now, as I said earlier, the oleoresins upon further distillation can lead to essential oils. The essential oils can also come from direct steam distillation of the dried plant parts. So it depends on which plant that you are using and which manufacturing process suits the overall purpose of that phytogenic. And many of the concentrated forms, particularly the alcoholic extracts, are sold also as tinctures. Then you dry the extract and adjust the strength of these extracts to achieve a predetermined content of active constituents in that extract. So then it can be sold as herbal extracts. And finally, like if you further purify and isolate a single chemical entity, which is sold as a phytochemical or a active pharmaceutical ingredient or active herbal ingredient many times. So that's the whole sequence of steps that you have to arrive at different forms of phytogenics. Well, all of us know that life is full of challenges, and phytogenics are not immune to it. There are several challenges when it comes to phytogenics. Couple of these are highlighted here. You can see proof of efficacy, natural variability, as I mentioned earlier, geography, climate, soil, many of the parameters contribute to the natural variability. Contamination is a major problem in today's context. We all know because of the lack of concern for environment, so many things got accumulated in the environment, like pesticides, aflatoxins, and things like that, which are today creating a major hurdle for phytogenics. So it's important for us to make sure that the phytogenic products are free of contaminants. And stability in the feed is an important parameter that ultimately has to make sure that the added substances in the feed are retaining their original chemistry and providing the intended biological effects. To study all these things, the most important part is knowledge. If there is a lack of knowledge, if there is a lack of scientific proof on how they work, etc., and if we are not able to understand it, it's not easy to achieve some of these things. And finally, in today's context, once again coming back to the concept of environment, if we start utilizing the resources available without a concern for environment, then we are not going to head anywhere. So sustainability perhaps is the most important part as far as the phytogenics is concerned, and ensuring that the medicinal plants used for phytogenics are sustainably harvested and ensure that there is a long-term plan for supply chain arrangements is crucial for phytogenics. And if we have to go back to the very first slide, if we have to come closer to the traditional knowledge, then the way you process the botanical also becomes important. Well, we are heading once again to another poll question. Go on to the screen once again and answer the poll question. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you once again. Let's go to the next part. So if we have to overcome some of the challenges that we talked about in the previous slide, what is needed? If we have to summarize it in few sentences, then there are three important points. One, how do you control the natural variations? Part number one. When it comes to this, you should have strong systems and processes which ensure not only sustainability, but also a thorough control over the chemistry of the plant right from harvesting till it reaches your place and till it gets converted into a phytogenic. So you need to monitor and control these variations and contain these variations within a particular limit to ensure consistency of the therapeutic activity. So that's where the concept of standardizations come into picture. And to monitor the quality, you need to have very sophisticated instrumentations, without which it is impossible in today's context, because most of the contaminants, for example, that we talk about are at ppm and ppb levels, parts per million and parts per billion levels. And these require highly sensitive, highly specific equipments. So some of these things are listed over here, like the LCMS, the liquid chromatography mass spectrometer, the ICP-MS, which is meant for the heavy metal analysis, then the chromatographic techniques like the HPLC, HPTLC, the gas chromatographic techniques particularly help in analyzing some of the volatile constituents. There are several such options available. And efficacy is finally the most important part for which the phytogenics are used. But the efficacy is not just about testing it. It is also to ensure that the quality of the products contribute to the efficacy of the product. And quality of the product also contributes to consistency of efficacy of the product. So these are the places where standardization plays a very important role. All said and done, these analytical techniques are critical to identify and quantify the phytogenic compounds in feeds. We wish to introduce the concept of standardized botanical powder. It's a formulation made out of finely processed and blended herbs that is inspired by Ayurvedic sciences. The concept of standardized botanical powders rest on 4 pillars of identity, which is ensured with the help of many techniques like macroscopic, microscopic, and the chromatographic methods. That takes care of the genuinity part of it. Then ensuring that undesirable substances are not there, like the heavy metals, pesticides, aflatoxins, residual solvents, ensuring the safety of the product. Assay, that means the components that contribute to the efficacy of the product. So that contributes to the efficacy, as I said. And finally, the batch-to-batch consistency, where we need to make sure that every batch is phytochemically consistent and also thermally stable with shelf lives defined. Well, the next question comes, what are the active constituents of NRSBP? Plants typically have, 2 types of constituents. One is primary metabolites and secondary metabolites. The primary metabolites are like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, chlorophylls, most of which are required for the growth, the photosynthesis, and many of the maintenance functions of the plant. Then the question comes, why do you need secondary metabolites, which come in the form of alkaloids, terpenes, glycosides? What do these secondary metabolites do? Where are these things stored in the plants? So the secondary metabolites are stored in the central vacuole, which is held together by the tonoplast. And it's important to make sure that in phytogenics, some of these metabolites are preserved. You may ask a fundamental question. Why do plants develop secondary metabolites? As all of us have, plants also have enemies. Plants also have competition. Plants also need protection. So a lot of research has happened in this area in terms of why plants produce secondary metabolites. A couple of examples. Some of the plants produce very bitter constituents. These bitter constituents kind of ward off some of the herbivores that otherwise would predate these plants. Likewise, some of the powerful alkaloids that possess strong biological activities, they can help in fending off some of the insects. They may not be able to handle the alkaloidal concentrations present in the leaves of the plant or in other parts of the plant. So these are some of the reasons why secondary metabolites are considered to be produced by the plants. Well, we talked about it a little bit. That is classes of secondary metabolites. There are multiple classes and there are many examples. The beauty of different classes of phytochemicals present is that each of these constituents have certain typical patterns of biological activities. And some of the constituents are very well known for it. For example, polyphenols in particular are very well known to be affecting the digestive system. They're very, very important from that angle. And in the human angle, they're considered very important for the heart. Likewise, some of the terpenoids are considered as very powerful anti-inflammatory agents. So that way there is some kind of pattern with respect to each of the secondary metabolites. Now the question is how the secondary metabolites produce the desired biological effects. This is the most interesting and perhaps the most researched question all over the world. As I said earlier, plants contain good number of or a soup of phytochemicals which are considered as active constituents. Now, broadly, we need to look at three components in explaining the biological activities of the plants. We already talked about plants have multiple activities. We talked about it in the previous slide. Now we are talking about the how part. Now, what are these three components that we need to keep in mind? The first part is there are good number of constituents present in your product. Part number one. Part number two, when these constituents go inside the body, they have multiple targets to act upon. So those multiple targets is the second component. So multiple constituents going in multiple targets. And each of the target in turn has a strong relationship to the disease. So for example, a particular target may be very strongly associated with a respiratory disease. Another target may be strongly associated with issues with liver and things of that nature. So that way these three components get totally integrated, and that's how the plants produce the biological activities. So the end effect of the phenotypic response or the biological activity that we see, say for example anti-stress activity, is not just on account of one mechanism of action, which is typical of the case of the chemicals and in some of the places highly concentrated forms of essential oils. So here the activity is brought about by multiple constituents working on multiple targets, bringing about multiple actions in the body, but all culminating into a final phenotypic response which we all see in the field. So that's the level of complexity that it has. But what's the significance of this complexity? It brings us back to the question of standardization. In other words, if your phytochemical composition is varying significantly, then you can imagine these varying concentrations of compounds can have varying levels of activity in the body, and the consistency gets compromised. That's the importance of standardization in the context of phytogenics. Well, today is the age of, biotechnologies, and today is the age of high-end technologies. To understand the mode of action, we have today to help us the omics technologies. What is omics technologies? Like, there are things that you can study at different levels, where we can talk about genomics, we can talk about proteomics, we can talk about transcriptomics, we can talk about metabolomics, or we can talk about metabonomics, or we can talk about metagenomics. There are several such platforms available, and these platforms are very powerful, particularly when combined with some of the sophistications that are available in, for example, the software front, where the bioinformatics have contributed significantly to understand and to integrate many of these things. At the same time, some of the mass spectroscopic methodologies like the MALDI-TOF, etc., are very useful when it comes to analyzing some of the proteins. And the other specializations and other advancements in the area of mass spec and NMR have significantly helped in analyzing the metabolites. Today, the power of some of the technologies like the NGS sequencing is such that it can sequence the whole human genome within a single day. So that's the level of power some of the technologies have these days, where we can go far deeper in the area of understanding the modes of action of the phytogenics. In the NRSBP, several of these technologies have been actually adopted, which you would learn in our subsequent series of webinars. Well, as mentioned earlier, you know that the phytogenics, the NRSBP, always comes in the form of polyherbals. And we know the importance of polyherbals. We don't need to explain about it. But the question is, what is the rationale for selection of herbs used in the formulation? And what's the rationale for blending it? These are the questions that very often kind of come to our mind. These are the places where what we call as science and art. So it's a combination of science and art. What's the importance of art here? That's the place where the experience and the knowledge comes into picture. Over a period of time, you would start feeling, based on your experience, that some of these medicinal plants can be really powerful. So it is some of the intuitive things also that play a very important role in creating a polyherbal mixture. But it is not just about art. It is also about science. Then what is the science? The science is like utilizing some of the mathematical models, for example. This is one such model where we can use this model called isobologram to look at, when I combine two substances, am I getting additive effect? Am I getting antagonistic effect? Or am I getting synergistic effect? Like, say, for example, if I have combined 20 milligram per liter of this substance, drug A, ideally I would have needed 30 micrograms, whereas it has actually, if it has synergistic effect, I would just need 10. These kinds of analysis can happen with some of the mathematical modeling methodologies that we have today, which can be very effectively utilized and which have been utilized in NRSBP. I think it was a bit of a lengthy session. I think you can have a short break in terms of a poll question over here. Request you to move on to your screens and answer the question. Thanks once again. Thank you very much. Well, this slide kind of gives you an overview of comparison between different forms of phytogenics, the NR-SBP, the crude drug powder, and essential oils. Well, without getting into further details, some of the key elements that really contribute significantly, as I mentioned, that need to be noted is standardization, uniformity in batches, some of the safety related aspects, stability, active constituents, quality. Need to consider many of these things. To conclude, I hope all of you agree that the journey of phytogenics appears pretty exciting. The journey is not over yet. It is still on. In this exciting journey, so many things have happened, as we have seen during the presentation, which ultimately led to the modern formulations. What are those things that have happened? If we have to summarize, the product evolutions, the quality upgradations, we talked about pharmacopoeia, we talked about compendia, monographs, we talked about efficacy, safety evaluations, and the mechanisms of actions and scientific evaluations, where we talked about all the high-end techniques that are available today. And finally, the commercial manufacturing is also important, where we should talk not just about the advancements in terms of manufacturing, but also the back-end processes like sustainability and strong supply chain. NR-SBP, the key characteristics, quality and standardization. And the high-end science that we talked about contribute to the overall efficacy ensuring of the phytogenics in the form of NR-SBP. Thank you very much. Well, you will learn more about the phytogenics in future, particularly with respect to NR-SBP, how NR-SBP is validated, and how do we standardize NR-SBP, the deeper aspects of how the standardization is achieved to ensure consistency, etc., and what parameters to be considered would be available in the next webinar, which will be on May 28th.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. And I'm sure this was a wonderful session with all of us. Though we are running out of time, this is as we promised that we will have the question and answer session. So we have received a lot of questions, and we understand that everyone thinks that they need to be answered. Definitely, we are going to answer each and every question which we have received, though not here immediately, but we are going to reply you on the email. And so I'll start taking few questions. So Dr. Deepak, first question, which phytogenic category natural remedies, feed additive come, and how we control their phytocompounds?
Okay. We are actually talking about standardized botanical powders, which come at the first level. As I mentioned earlier, when we talk about herbs, we can straight away go into juicing these herbs, or we can dry the products and ensure that the overall quality in terms of some of the phytocompounds are controlled. So that's the place where the standardized botanical powders play an important role. And Natural Remedies is offering standardized botanical powders.
You spoke about quorum sensing things. There is a gentleman who has asked a question that what specific component of phytogenic feed additive is responsible for quorum sensing inhibition?
Good question. This knowledge is actually still evolving in the scientific arena, but some of the classes of compounds, particularly like polyphenols, have been found to possess significant anti-quorum sensing properties.
So there is one more question, and I really appreciate all the audience. They are asking a lot of questions, and it is difficult for us to choose and take questions. So we are just taking in the chronological order they have come. So, sir, next question is how to evaluate that which plant is more suitable for any specific function. So what you will say on this, sir?
Okay. Well, I think the simple answer for that is we have certain screening methodologies available. So both at in vitro and in vivo levels. So we can subject a number of or a panel of medicinal plants to some of these assays and look for the biological activity that is maximum. And you could consider that plant as the one best suited for that particular indication.
So as we spoke about a lot of instruments, and since this is a standardized botanical powder we spoke about, so there is an interesting question that can we analyze phytocompounds in animal feed, and how easy it is, or you feel it is complicated or difficult?
It certainly is not easy. The answer is very simple, because these constituents, when get incorporated in feed, would go in very low concentrations. But at the same time, some of the sophisticated methodologies which I mentioned over there, like the LC-MS and many of the chromatographic methodologies, actually have the capability to detect and quantify these compounds in the feed.
So you say that that analysis looks difficult, but it is not insoluble, or that cannot be solved. It can be analyzed and can be used.
It can be done. Yes, it can.
So since time is running, we are going to take the last question. Our sincere apologies, we are not able to take too many questions. So this is the last question. Sir, can you explain what is the effect of phytogenic additive in palatability of animals? I think everyone looks forward for this, and animal is also not an exception. So how what is your take on this, sir?
Well, see, there are two ways of dealing with it. One is utilizing technologies to impart certain tastes. Like, for example, if a plant is highly bitter, you could adopt certain technologies to make them palatable. This is part number one. But at the same time, there is another approach where some of the medicinal plants have certain properties that actually enhance the palatability. So you can incorporate those medicinal plants to overall improve the palatability function of the phytogenics.
Okay, so I think we have taken a lot of time from audience, and I'm again repeating, we are going to answer all your questions and you are going to get that in emails. Our sincere apologies, due to timeline we are not able to take it, and that is for the session, and we look forward for the next session. Thank you very much for joining and asking interesting question. See you next. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.